Welcome to DubLife Diaries, the podcast where passion meets the open road. I'm Joe Person, your host, and also a lifelong dubber. Buckle up, because this ride is just beginning. This podcast is sponsored by Volksmania magazine. Good times, great cars, awesome Volksmaniacs. Visit Volksmania.com to learn more about this class-leading VW magazine. All right, welcome back to DubLife Diaries, the VW lifestyle podcast. If you love classic air-cooled Volkswagens and the stories behind the people who live this lifestyle, well, you're in the right place. Now, my guest today is a legend in the VW scene, Mr. Dennis Deno-Stiles. This guy's been turning wrenches, cruising the highways, and keeping the classic VW spirit alive for years. He's got some insane stories, some deep knowledge, and a passion for these machines that is second to none. We're going to dive into his journey, how he got into VWs, and go through some just straight up crazy stories from the VW world. So that's your cue. Grab a drink, kick back, and let's get into it. Mr. Deno-Stiles from Dino's Garage. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Joe? It's good to be here.
What's up, brother? Yes, man. Thank you. Now, before we get things kicked off, I do want to give just a couple shout outs to my sponsor, Volksmania magazine, the flyest VW magazine in the world. They have issued me and you, my listeners, a discount code. If you go and subscribe today, use DubLife10. That's DUBLIFE, the number 1, the number 0. So DubLife10 for 10% off your first issue. Also, shout out to you, my man Dino, helping out the podcast by donating, brother. Thank you, man. That feeling you get when somebody believes in you, I got that feeling from you the first time we talked. And man, I got to tell you, bro, I just appreciate that, man, because not everybody gets to feel like that. So thank you for that. I do respect you.
Got a lot of people that believed in me and my team whenever we got started. So, it's just trying to pay it forward,
Man, that's so awesome. I really do appreciate it. So also shout out to the 26th annual V-Dubs Over the Skyway ride down here in Tampa Bay. Go to saltydub.com to register. Make sure that you use Able Builders, all one word, all caps. ABLEBUILDERS. Able Builders is your discount code. Why? Because the first 300 dubs are free. That's right. First 300 dubs are free. We got about 158 registered right now. So keep it rocking, keep it flowing. All right, buddy. Back to you, man. So look, how does a guy go from turning wrenches in his home garage to running one of the biggest vintage VW shops in the DC Metro?
So I'm actually in the garage right now. I started in. It really boiled down. It was an accident. So often you hear these stories, without going wasting too much time on the ins and outs. Basically, I had a family business that was not doing all that great that I shared with my brother. And as a consequence, I was driving a truck and trying to, so often you hear about family businesses and you just think they're just making millions. And that's often not the case. And we were basically restructuring it and it was making no money. And I've been wrenching on Volkswagens for over 20 years now and have always had them as a hobby and have worked on cars on the side. And I was getting really tired of driving a truck. And my wife one day came to me and said, you ought to, why don't you start working on some cars on the side? And another good friend of mine, this lady, Adrian, who I had been helping her with her bus in that time frame, big shout out to Adrian Lungden. She was like, you ought to do this too. So I had some really good friends that were like, hey man, give it a shot. So I have this 3-bay garage I'm in right now. We're just so blessed. It's funny because people see this garage. I think I have this huge house. No, I have a little teeny house with a garage that's like the size of the house. It's priorities, man, priorities. And I started working on Volkswagens in the evening and it was just going to be okay, 1 or 2 cars here and there. I knew there weren't many shops left in my area, but because I always worked on my own cars, it was never I didn't really pay that much attention, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize was the absolute vacuum of full service, shops willing to kind of do anything. So I started working on cars in the evening and then it turned into I started having to call out from work to get work done on the cars. And one day my wife kind of looked at our finances and said, honey, you're making more in a 3 or 4 hour window at night working on these cars than you're making all day driving a truck. And it was a pretty good paying CDL job. So she was like, honey, once again, props to my wife, Brittany. I just cannot tell you how much this woman means to me. She said, you know what, quit your truck driving job. Let's go all in. The other consequence, I had a little newborn baby, and she's like, you need to be home with your daughter more. And if you work out of the garage, some of the coolest memories I have early on were my little infant daughter opening the door to the garage with, my wife holding her in her arms, and her looking at me, and there's daddy at work. Those are, I hope, some of her earliest memories. So yeah, just kind of by accident. And before I knew it, I had like cars lining my street. My wife couldn't park in the driveway because we had like four Volkswagens parked side by side. You had to like open the door and crawl through them to get in. Sooner or later, your neighbors are going to be like, you're not operating a business out of your house, are you? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it started.
Go back to the beginning of your Volkswagen passion. What was the first VW, air-cooled VW that you had or had access to that really made you fall in love with the culture?
When I was about, I can tell you exactly, I was about 6 years old, and I was at the Rockville, Maryland Classic Car Show. It's been going on for like 50 something years. Makes you wonder, like, what were the first classic cars there? Just like horses or something? I mean, you know what I mean? Like it must have been like old chitty chitty bang bang cars and stuff. But, I was walking around as most kids do, and, get off my car. Don't touch my car. I'd look at a Camaro or a Mustang. Don't touch that. Get away from it. And there was this group of just this kaleidoscope of buses and bugs. And I remember there was like a Samba bus with the big tent awning on the side of it. And he had Coca-Cola things everywhere. And I just was drawn in. I was like, what are these different looking little cars? And these people were so kind, and they let me sit in the car. And I remember one guy, I wish I knew who this guy was. In like 1991, if you were at the Rockville Classic Car Show and you had an early, like, sort of Indian red colored Beetle, please reach out to me, because I'd love to thank you. This guy let me sit in his car. He showed me the motor, how the motor was in the back. And I knew I was looking at not only something different, but even as a little kid, I recognized there was this wonderful culture. And I want, and then, the next thing you know, it's, oh, I want the toy Beetle. I want this. And I saw the movie Herbie and all that. But it was that car show and the kindness of that group of people that drew me to it at a very young age.
Okay. I mean, I feel that and I felt that. Just the coolness of that culture, of the culture, the one that you and I know so well. So
Yeah.
we were touching a moment ago on the moment that you knew that you had to go all in, and it felt like that moment was when your income started to surpass, working just a few hours a day, your full-time job, when you were wrenching on cars. So we don't have to elaborate that on too much more, but I do want to hear this. What was one of the biggest challenges that you had in scaling from, hey, side hustle, extra money, to now, hey, I'm all in, full scale business?
So I think this is a great segue. So, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, and there's nothing better than doing something you love for work. I realized, like you said, I've got the ability, I've got the money's coming in, so I can actually afford to do this. It was finding a place to do it. I live in, like I said, the DC metro area. It is incredibly expensive to find a place to rent or buy or anything, and I couldn't keep operating out of my garage. So there was this little gas station near my house that is full service. That's been owned by the same family since the 50s. And I used to always kind of tip the gas station attendant well, just because it's the right thing to do. But I kept telling him, man, I'm really looking for a place, if you know anybody, because, scuttlebutt at these places is tremendous. And eventually he said, you know what? We actually have a guy. We have a 3-bay garage downstairs. And, you didn't hear it from me, but the landlord is, it's this guy's probably not going to be here a whole lot longer, and they might be interested in renting you some space. And they did. The price was so just incredibly reasonable. It was absolutely a gift. And the gas station is direct to you gas. Huge shout out to the Langdon family who gave me my opportunity. And it was interesting. One of the hangups was there was a bay that had like a skid steer they used for snow plowing, and they had a big oil tank and a tractor, and we couldn't figure out, like, well, what do we do with that stuff? The guy who was renting it had been an auto detailer, so most of his work was done outside. And I said, well, why don't I just buy a sea container? We'll stick all that stuff in a sea container, and then heaven forbid things don't work out, I'll just pack all my stuff up in the sea container and move off. So the answer, roundabout answer is just being able to find a place to work. And it was just, the universe works in mysterious ways and just things line up. And just really, I owe it all to this one grumpy old gas station attendant. Huge shout out to Gary, who kind of, put the bug in my ear that, see what I did there? The bug in my ear that this might be available.
And this is a 1950s gas station.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is even cooler, right?
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion.
When I saw the place, I
how
was like, I wish I could be based here. And I manifested it, it manifested into existence.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And a super cool story how it all came together. When you put it out there in the universe, sometimes you got to be careful because they happen.
Be careful what you wish for. Yeah.
That's why they say it. That's why they say it. So talking about the shop now, what's one thing that somebody's brought into your shop thinking it was an easy fix? Like they always say, like my background's HVAC. Sometimes we'll take service calls and they'll say, oh, it's just this and it's just that. And they're like limiting. You're like, you have no idea what this is. So,
I have one that stands out, and it was a car. This lady wanted me to look at a car that she was buying. It was pretty far away, so she was only able to send me pictures and some video. And it was a beautiful light blue Super Beetle, and the price was right. I actually negotiated the price down quite a bit, and the car ran wonderful and looked great. And she took pictures underneath the car, and there was no rust, obviously. And we get the car to my shop, and it actually took a few days because we were initially just kind of doing minor tune-up stuff to it. And we put the car on the lift. I had never seen this before. The rear transmission mounts, those two forks that come off the back, had very apparently rotted out at some point. None of the other car was rotten. It looked like it had the original pans. And the previous owner, somewhere along the line, a mechanic had replaced or patched them with Schedule 40 sewer pipe. And they were cut in half, shoved on there, welded in place, and they still had threads on them. And we didn't really know what to tell them. Like, we were like, this is the craziest repair I've ever seen. We put a jack on it. We jacked the car up by it. It actually was pretty solid, but like, for how long? And we reached out to the lady, and she was like, yeah, we probably, she understood that this surprise. We were able to, I have an amazing fabricator who came in and was able to take an old car with good, framework, square everything up, and the car, and got the car back together. But man, that was definitely nothing else on this car. Like everything else in this car, the interior, the motor, everything else was beautiful. That definitely was away we go when we saw that. It was something.
So the scene, you're heavy in it. You guys are busy. It seems like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've seen the videos of the shop and all the cars there. How do you balance being a dad, being a husband, and also being a business owner?
It is hard. It is really hard. And I'll be upfront, man. We've been in business now a few years, and it's still very difficult sometimes. I'll tell you a big one, and this is not a knock to my customers, because I consider all of my customers friends. I really try to. And early on, I a lot of customers like became my friends on Facebook, and I had to really set some boundaries with, like, I had people message me. I'll tell you what, they're no longer a customer for a bunch of different reasons, but somebody messaged me at like 1 a.m. on like a Sunday, wanting to know where they could get a VW shaped cake made. And they started calling me. Like, it was really like using Facebook Messenger. And it's like, it was strange because this was a customer. We get a lot of weird, like we're big enough that we get cars dropped off where we never actually meet the person. And then it just gets taken, on a tow truck or something back to them. And this was one of those. And it was like, I don't know you. And I have at the time, a 1.5-year-old, and I'm not going to answer where to get a VW cake at like 1 a.m. on a Sunday. That's absolutely crazy. That said, I do know where to get a VW shaped cake. I'm a night owl, but it's like, that's my time, so it is difficult. Just shut the phone off at 5, that's really it. Just I have a work phone. It just gets shut off, and anything that comes through, get, there's nothing I can do to help you at like 10:30 on a Tuesday that, I'm gonna, I just can't, call Haggerty, call AAA, whoever. I'm sorry. We'll work it out in the morning. We'll get things figured out. So I think that's really it. Just setting boundaries with customers that, there is the time that I am at work and I am all in, and there's the time that I'm at home with my family, and that's just super important.
Super healthy. Awesome. So I've seen your Facebook. I've seen some of your videos. It made me think about social media and business because I know how much of an impact social media can have. So, do you have, I guess, a different approach to Facebook, to Instagram, to TikTok? How do these social media style sites play into your business, or what's their role in your success these days?
So I got a funny story about that. So I use Facebook mostly just because it's just such an easy platform to just sort of linearly go from my personal Facebook to swap back and forth. I'm really not a very tech savvy guy. I really enjoyed like technology until probably like 2003, and then it just got so crazy and discombobulated that I just kind of if I could have a flip phone, I probably would. I'm one of those people. But one day a customer reached out and said, "Hey, I saw your Instagram and I really like what you guys are doing and I really want to get some work done." And they were very specific about some work we had just done. And there was a long pause, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to help you." And I finished the phone call, and I got off the phone, and I sat there kind of looking around like, I don't have an Instagram. What are they talking about? Like, and they were very specific about something we had just finished relating to fuel injection work. So I asked my employees, and one of my employees goes, "Oh yeah, we've got an Instagram and a TikTok." And one of my employees had just been behind the scenes, like building a social media sort of network for me, and he showed it to me, and it was really wonderful. He's a young guy, he's in his early 20s, and that was wonderful. So the answer is, yeah, vicariously we're on Instagram, and I don't think our TikTok's real active, but we definitely, Facebook is mostly it. As far as impact, we're so busy. I know this sounds like almost pretentious, but like I have a hard time like advertising because we are just so like we just hired another employee just to keep, because it's spring and we just have so many cars that need to get done. So I'm actually kind of careful about how much I advertise because I really like using things like this podcast where it's like people that are very serious and in the scene are going to be reaching out to me, and not just sort of casual like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a bug," and yeah. So
So, speaking on that community, the VW community is a pretty tight one.
oh
So,
yeah.
any any legends, any big names, any celebrities or anything like that ever come in as a customer or anything like that?
I have a very good friend of mine who was in a pretty well known punk band, and I hate being silly. You've heard their music, I guarantee it. And I don't like being cryptic, but just he prefers privacy. Not him, but he's recommended some people from the Long Island area. I'll just say that, to get some work done, and I'm working on a couple of their cars. So yeah, and some of these people are pretty. I wouldn't say famous, but couple of very well-to-do people that have some really ambitious projects. One we finished that was really cool, and one that we're working on right now that probably aren't the average. Hey, I just want to get a tune-up, just want to get some carburetors done, that kind of thing. So it's always cool when you can start working on stuff like that.
What's one of the sketchiest road trip stories that you've heard? Because you're in a unique position. You get to be, the guy at the end that gets to hear all these crazy stories of how people broke down on the road and then they end up at your shop.
I had a buddy of mine. I'll tell you what. I have one. Yeah, definitely. There was two of us back in like 2004, and we were driving to Ocean City, and I had this beat up 70 like 7 Beetle. It was a standard. It was like the last year of the standard, and he had like a 74 Super, and he had been teaching his girlfriend to drive stick. And we made it over to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which is a pretty substantial bridge, about 7 mile long bridge. And he just lost his clutch coming down the other side. We rolled into a place called Kent Island, and we were able to get the car kind of the side of the road. Now, these were late enough model Beetles. They had kind of heavy bumpers on them. So I pushed him into town, and there was like an independent, like it wasn't a Western Auto, but like, a very small independent auto parts place. And he went in and bought a clutch, just a clutch, no pressure plate, no anything. Just, all he could basically afford. He wanted to have some beer money for the weekend, so he definitely all he was going to buy was a clutch. And he borrowed a jack, and we're in the parking lot, and this guy is laying under the car with the motor. This is a tough dude with the motor on his chest, and thinking that he could he could lower the motor down onto his chest. It completely knocked the wind out of him. I probably hurt him, frankly. He slid out from under the car. This whole thing is being held up with like scissor jacks and stuff that we got from junkyards.
Wow.
It was so sketchy. And finally we realized, we gotta, we get the clutch put on the motor and everything like that, and we finally, we were trying to figure out how to get the motor back up in it, and that's what it was. The shop felt bad. This shop, they actually gave us, I think it was like a jack that was new, and they let us use it just so we could get this motor back up in the car. And I mean, that guy was just just absolutely useless the whole weekend. I mean, when that motor, he puffed his chest up with like a piece of plywood he'd found from the back behind the shop, and just like the videos you see, where the guy pulls the motor out of the car, and it was just, I'm amazed it did. I mean, it could have killed him, when you really think about it. And but he got the clutch in, we got the car down the road, and we made it to Ocean City. We had us a good old weekend, and it was a lot of fun after that for us. Maybe not for him.
How about how about any of your customers? Anybody ever tell you a crazy breakdown story that just immediately impacted you, and their car that was broken down ended up in your shop?
We've definitely, yeah. I mean, we have a van at our shop right now that caught on fire while the guy was driving it. I mean, burned up. We're doing an engine swap on it. It is going to have a flat four in it, but that was pretty wild. Like, he was driving down the road and it caught on fire, and he was like going fast enough that he was struggling to get it off the road so that he could, just be able to stop and put out the fire. And once he did, he was able to get it out. It was pretty, the Vanagons actually are pretty good about like kind of being contained compared to like older bay window buses and stuff from what I've seen. But man, it just cooked the motor, and he was very lucky. He was able to get in there with a good sized fire extinguisher. I mean, this is definitely, if we're going to make a plug, this is definitely a plug for blaze cut systems, because it could have maybe prevented it. But that was a pretty sketchy story. And seeing the bus afterwards with the plastic vents just melted down into the bus, and seeing how bad the engine was burned and the fire damage from it, I can only imagine how scary that must have been. So yeah, and it definitely, as a mechanic, makes me just really remember that when these cars are leaving, the fuel systems have to be perfect. There can be no leaks, et cetera, et cetera.
So what's your craziest personal adventure aside from that clutch?
It's kind of dark, I'm going to be up front, but a Volkswagen saved my life because it broke down.
That's so give me the dirt. Give me the dirt.
Yeah, so I was working with a volunteer outfit out of Logan, West Virginia, and they had a Vietnam era Huey helicopter, and I was involved with that. I'm also a pilot. That's something I did for quite a few years until that family business I mentioned, that came along, and I stepped into that, stepped away from flying and stepped into that. And once I had a family and stuff, I just decided, you know, to step away from flying as a career and focus on my family's businesses. So we were supposed to go to an event where we're going to be taking up like Vietnam veterans and veterans of any war up in this Huey. And I was one of the crew members on it. I was expected to be there on a weekend for this event. And I live about 6 hours away, and there was kind of this running joke that, I better leave like a month ahead if I'm coming out there in the bus. And I had this 71 VW bus. We called it the Pickle, and it was a Westphalia, and it was this ugly green color. And I just had rebuilt the motor in it and redid everything. I converted it to an alternator and all that. And I'm driving along, and I make it pretty good ways out of town. And what ended up happening, and I haven't seen this much, if even ever, the brand new alternator's internal voltage regulator failed, and it just wouldn't charge. And there's no like easy way to fix that on the side of the road. I called Haggerty. I had it towed back. I called the event. I said, "Hey guys, I'm not going to make it." And at this point I wasn't working in aviation full time. This was just a volunteer thing for fun. And they said, "Hey, don't worry about it." And it basically few days goes by and I'm making plans to come out that weekend in a normal vehicle and get a hotel, and that's no fun. And I get a call the night that I'm leaving that the helicopter went down. And it was a night that I was supposed to be there on that helicopter as a crew member. And three very good friends of mine are no longer with us because of that incident. And I just can't help. I'm sorry, I get emotional thinking about it because they were good people, good men, veterans. Two of them were veterans. And I also around that time had found out that I was going to be a father to a little girl. We had just done our gender reveal. And I just wonder sometimes, with an insane amount of grief and guilt, did that bus decide, you know what, today's the day that you're not going on a helicopter ride? And in a peculiar way, it just said, no, we're done. We're done here. And yeah, that bus, I'm convinced, saved my life. So,
That just gave me the goosebumps all over.
yeah, yeah. Sorry to be dark, but yeah, it's probably my craziest story. It really is something to these cars, I'll tell you. It really is.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever found inside one?
I'm trying to see if it's easy to grab. I think it's actually in my shop right now. It was a pistol holster, and it was in the front. When you remove, it was on a standard Beetle, and it was where you remove that plate you take off, right in between the beam that you remove the shifter linkage, the shifter shaft out. We opened that up, and it was just kind of sitting in there, and we bore scoped it to see if there was also, a pistola in there, and there was not, but there was a small holster for like a Saturday night special. Why somebody would have put that in there, just a holster, I could see almost putting the whole pistol in there. Why they would just put this little leather, real small little thing like that, it was very strange. I contacted the owner. They had just bought the car. They didn't have any idea. So they said, they didn't have any interest in keeping it. So we just kind of have it here. I have it at my shop at the house.
That's
Weird, strange thing. I mean, we find a lot of stuff in buses, especially older buses, but we find a lot of questionable substances sometimes that you find that are really, really old, and sometimes the owners are like, oh yeah, about that. And sometimes the owners are like, oh, I didn't, that wasn't mine, and
right.
who knows?
So if you
Who
could
knows?
time travel and go to any VW era, which one are you going to? And tell us why.
Man, there's a great book that I read. It's about Volkswagen buses, and it has a lot of kind of short stories. And one of them, they're talking about taking a VW bus up into, of all places, like Afghanistan and Persia. And before, it was like, this was back in like this, I think it was the 60s or something, before there was, any wars going on there and stuff. And they just meandered from Europe all the way up through that part of the world. So seeing that part of the world in like an old bus would have been just incredible before everything went to chaos in that part of the universe. That would have been incredible. So yeah, Europe going into Persia and stuff in the 60s would have been pretty rad. So
What's one air-cooled model that you feel is the most underrated?
1993 manual Eurovans, because they're absolutely everything. They're the complete opposite of what makes Eurovans awful. They're a 2.5 brutally simple 5-cylinder naturally aspirated motor, and they have a wiggle stick. They have a manual transmission. I am partial because our shop van is a 1993 manual Eurovan, but it is absolutely the easiest thing to work on. It is probably one of the few water-cooled Volkswagens I actually enjoy, and it's interesting because that lineage immediately becomes terrible when you start introducing, like, the automatics in those, are in the later model ones, are just about unsupportable. It's like $9,000 to get one rebuilt or something, and then the VR6 motors, while they're great motors, they're just awful to work on in that tight space. So yeah, 1993 first year, first generation Eurovans with a manual. Most
Okay.
underrated.
What's a controversial VW opinion of yours that will piss people off?
In my opinion, and I'm saying that very carefully, dual carburetors just, in my opinion, are the juice isn't worth the squeeze on a 100% stock motor. Generally speaking, there's not a whole, you have to jet them down so much. And while I agree they will add a little bit of performance, if you don't have like Panchito heads or bigger heads, I think you're just better off putting more money and effort into like a nice set of nice exhaust, a good distributor like Pat Down Shockwave or a Magna Spark or something like that. And really just, I think a lot of people are trying to fix problems with cars by putting dual carbs on, not realizing that the problem isn't actually the carburetors aren't going to fix the problem. Check, do valve adjustments, things like that, and you'll get a much better running car. So yeah, I'll just say it. I don't think dual carbs should be on stock size motors unless you're doing a lot of head work. And then they're great. 1600 with some Panchitos and some little 34s or some baby Dells or something is pretty rad. They run good.
Yeah. So money wasn't an issue. What's your dream build? Is it behind you?
It very well could be. I probably would go a little bit more all in. This is a 1957 Oval Beetle. It's named Mabel. Shout out to my guy Jason Wharton, who did all the pinstriping on it. This has a 356 motor. It's not currently in it this second. It's just getting some final machine work done. It's being assembled right now, but it's had a 356 motor in it, and that's a pretty cool setup. Makes right around 100 horsepower, but it is pretty rad to be able to say, yeah, I got to actually have a Beetle with a Porsche motor. That said, money no object, I would probably do a 50, like a 52 split. And money no object, I'd put one of those crazy quad cam Porsche motors from like like a James Dean Porsche in it or something. That would be.
Woo!
There's some guys out in Cali that have one in like a Baja Bug, and it's like a $200,000 motor, and these guys are ripping it around in this Baja Bug somewhere in Southern California, just on the streets, being just complete, these guys are like in their like late 50s, 60s, just being delinquents in it on the street. It's just such a cool fantasy of mine to have one of those motors. So yeah, there you go. Quad cam and a split window bug.
Awesome.
Definitely be cool. Yeah.
Where can people find you? I know your phone number is behind me, but this is a podcast. This is a podcast, so they're not going to be able to see you unless it'll be on the shorts and stuff. But if somebody wants to work with you or book you or come check out the shop, DC metro area, tell us how they can find you.
We are on Facebook. That's probably the easiest way to find us, or you can give me a call on that number during business hours. I'm in and out all the time, picking up parts and motors, moving motors around, things like that. So definitely call first. But yeah, just through Facebook, we have Messenger. I'm very active on Dino's Garage, Facebook Messenger, things like that. I will say this time of year we are super busy. We are probably not taking any major work right now for a couple months, but anything small like brake jobs, you just need to get your car ready for show season or whatever, give me a call. We'll try to squeeze you in, valve adjustments, things like that.
So look, what's next for the shop? Any big plans, any ideas, any groundbreaking announcements or anything? Tell me what's coming up for the shop.
Well, we've been working pretty heavily with fuel injection systems over the last year, and the Holly Sniper systems are pretty good, but they're really good for like stock to mild cars. And we've got some interesting stuff coming down the pipe with fuel injection that I think is going to give people looking for a sort of middle of the ground performance option, give people with more middle of the ground performance motors some options that aren't really available right now unless you're spending, $5, 6, 7, $8,000. So yeah, be looking for that. Also, just generally just expanding. We've just hired some more employees. We've just actually leased some more space, so we have more space to work on cars. We have at any given time like 20 cars at our shop. So we really. Yeah, to those that are watching, they're like, "Where's my car?" Hey, we're working on it. We're getting more help. We're up to 5 employees now. So
good for you guys, man. Good for you guys.
Thank you so much.
It's awesome to hear that it's alive like that.
Oh yeah.
I know you're in a pretty densely populated area, but still, it's still cool just to know that there's that kind of a scene that's there.
Yeah, well, like I said, oh yeah, and we have multiple. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 air cooled clubs all around me. Let me see. I'm not like, here's one right here. This is a shout out to my guy Flip, the Air VW Air Raid, and they represent from DC, Maryland, Virginia.
Nice.
So yeah, Flip, you're out there. You're one of the coolest dudes I know. There's so many clubs and scenes out here. The Mid Maryland VW Club. Shout out to Gidget. You're my girl. I went with her down a few years ago to the 53rd Herbie anniversary. And we got to drive in her car Levi, her '66 Beetle Levi on Daytona Speedway. I was actually dressed as Buddy Hackett from Herbie. I think I'm in Hot VW as one of the issues, dressed as Buddy Hackett. I always thought I'd get in there for having a cool car. I got in there for being a fat guy, but hey, I'll take it. But
Dave Evans, don't you?
Oh yeah, Dave Evans. Yeah, Dave. I was hanging out with Dave Evans down there. He's a good friend of mine. He's a great dude. Shout out to Dave, man. He is the Herbie guru of gurus. So yeah. Yeah, it's been incredible seeing how big we've gotten, how quickly. I think but the sad reality is there just aren't a lot of shops down here. There are a few. I mean, Cooker's Performance out of Williamsport, Maryland. Huge shout out to Bob Cook. They produce some of the most incredible, both, restorations as well as performance builds, you name it. But their focus really is on, really, really high end restorations. And, our focus is more on just, more keeping cars running and, more basic customizations and things like that. But we do absolutely have access to a great painter and things like that. We have done a couple of full restorations, but I know my pecking order, I'm nowhere near Cookers. So, but yeah, there aren't really any other full service shops directly in my area. There are in my area, but they're not directly. And I work with these guys.
Sure.
That's the nice thing. I am friendly with these shops, and we do, share each other's shirts and sugar sometimes, and certainly give each other work as we're busy or as necessary.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And again, that's this amazing community.
There's so much work, with the lack of shops, that anybody who's doing anything on a small scale, there's plenty of slices in the pie to eat. I promise you that. We can all work together.
Sure. All right. So no overthinking this, but I'm going to go through a few questions with you. And these are what I call rapid fire. So I want the first answers that come to mind. Let's make it quick. You ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Best VW engine ever made.
1600 dual port. They just run great. Very easy to work on, very easy to modify.
All right. How about worst VW model of all time?
Diesel Vanagons, and I'm probably gonna get fried for saying that, but they don't do anything well. They overheat. They're slow. I don't think there's a lot of part support for them. I just never encountered anybody that had anything good to say about them, and I've never encountered one that ran well.
All right. One tool in your shop that you can't live without. One tool.
13 millimeter wrench.
13 millimeter wrench.
13 millimeter wrench. Use it all the time.
Dream road trip. Where are you going? Who's going with you?
I've got a good friend of mine, a guy named Evan. He does a lot of VW dismantling and stuff like that. And he has been a huge supporter of me in the VW world, not just with parts, but as a friend. Probably me and Evan, and, just grabbing probably a Bug and just running down, up into the Northeast and just kind of picking and finding old parts in cars and barns and things like that. He's a guy that he's a good guy to go on road trips with. Yeah, Evan Buchanan. If you know that name, look him up. He's got a lot of cool VW parts. He's a cool guy to go VW picking with. So yeah.
Biggest DIY mistake that VW owners make in the air-cooled scene?
It's really just this trying to go cheap on things. Parts are right. Yeah, absolutely. Get the best quality parts you can afford. And I think just understand these cars aren't economy cars anymore. They're classic vintage cars. I always feel terrible when people call and they're like, oh yeah, I want to build a car with my son. We're just going to kind of build it as we go. And we start talking and I explain to them what it actually costs to do it. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And it's like, well, but it, as long as you remember that it's all about the smiles per gallon and the sentimental value. Yeah. That's really what it's about. They're so worth it. And the community alone, the cost of admission just to the community alone is worth the, paying the piper. So yeah, just good parts, spend the money, do it once, do it right.
Love it. One piece of advice from you for somebody who is potentially looking to start their own VW shop?
Do it. I mean, that's really the biggest thing. Do it. Do a lot of research. Do not be afraid to look in the book. Don't be afraid to go on YouTube. Don't think you know everything. To this day, I walked into my shop this morning and one of my employees was looking at there's a guy Slade's Beatles, and he was looking at a shout out to Slade, one of my amazing dude. He was watching a Slade's Beetle video on how to do something on some suspension thing. And it was not necessarily that he didn't know like how to do that sort of thing, but it was really just like a good reference. Like, okay, let me watch somebody do this right now so I don't mess this up. And there's no shame in that at all. Just open the book, open the service manuals, Bentley, whatever. They're great. That's really it, and just do it. Get out there, grab a wrench, do it.
Great advice. Just do it. So, who's the biggest legend in the VW world to you?
This is going to be an interesting one because he was not a mechanically inclined person, but it would absolutely be my father. My father, when I was young, really invested in me to be involved in mechanical stuff, and he knew that my love for Volkswagens was so powerful that he always made sure to get me model kits of Volkswagens. And as I got older, he helped me get he lent me some of the money to buy my first VW. He bought me my first tool set to work on VWs. Funny story, he actually repoed my first VW. I was making payments to him, and I came out from high school one day and the car wasn't there. And I said, "Where's my car?" I thought it got stolen. And he said, "Well, son, life lesson, you don't make your payment, dad and his friend come take the car from you." And yeah, I mowed the lawn a few times and got the car back. But my dad taught me
Good
so
job,
many
Dad. Good job, Dad.
yeah, and that was the only time I've ever had a car repoed, so it was my dad. So my dad, real legend in the sense that he just, he saw my passion. And I think the biggest thing here is he recognized that he himself was not a mechanically inclined person. He'd had Beatles as a kid and as a teenager, and always told me stories about having them, but it was always kind of like in the background that he didn't know how to work on it himself, and he always had to take it to gas stations, things to get fixed. And he thought it was so brilliant that even as a teenager, there I was teaching myself there was no YouTube back then, teaching myself through books and trial and error how to work on it. He was just so supportive of that. Yeah, and my dad's not here anymore, so I really feel strongly that I do it, really, a lot of it with him in mind.
Awesome, man.
Keep that moving forward, yeah. So my dad, yeah.
What's his name?
His name is David Stiles, and he, was a tremendous man. So,
Awesome, man.
yeah, yeah.
All right, one mod that should be absolutely illegal on classic VWs.
Oh, man, I know exactly what it is. Those Monza mufflers with the 4 tips. Like, you just need, like, those anybody who has those just needs to go to jail. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you have them. They were and they were so cool. They were so cool, and I'd almost go so far to say that, like, there are certain vehicles, like, if you're doing a really retro, like, 80s or 90s looking build, I'll almost give it a pass. But, man, if you're just building, like, a normal Cowlick car or something like that, do not put those on there. They don't add performance. They don't sound very good, and they're just gonna rust out in a year or two. Get something decent. Get something stainless. Get something with a merged header. Don't put those Monzas on there.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen a classic air-cooled car turned into?
Like a hot dog. Like there's this bug that kicks around. It's a giant. It's got a big old, like, just coming out the front of it and out the back of it. This fiberglass, big, just giant wiener sticking out of the front of the car, set up like a bun. And it's still a bug. Like, it doesn't. They didn't like try to make it like completely change it. It's not like a banana car where the whole car is a banana. It's literally just a bug with a wiener sticking out of the front and a wiener sticking out of the back. It's the funniest looking thing.
I can almost hear how that looks.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, and it's in a hot dog stand. It's somewhere up in PA. It's pretty funny.
That's
It's red, of course.
Listen, man, this has been awesome.
Oh yeah,
some of your stories are amazing. They're legendary. Any last words for the VW community?
thank you. Just thank you so much for the support. It's I'm thinking about my daughter. I've got a little 2.5-year-old daughter, and the fact that you as a community are, how I'm able to, support my family, how I'm able to not just my family, but my employees' families. I have employees that came to me looking for work and, are now able to, I'm able to I'll just say it, I'm able to pay them well enough that they're able to have, life altering changes, buy homes, have nice things. And it's tough when you're in the custom car community to be, or the customer classic car or the car culture community, to be able to find something that actually can not only support you, but support you in a way where you can really get ahead. So, I mean, if there's anything I could say to the VW community as a whole, it's just thank you so much for believing in what we do. My name is Dino. My shop is Dino's Garage, but it really comes down to my employees. I am nothing without my team. So just thank you so much for believing in us and what we're doing. And we really look forward to being able to continue to serve the VW community and bringing these cars, keeping these cars going and taking them to places that, they've never gone. So thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of DubLife Diaries. Thanks for riding along with us and diving into these incredible stories of the people in the dubs that drive their dreams. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe or hit that follow button so you never miss an adventure. Do you have a story to tell or know somebody else who's living the dub life? Awesome! Reach out to us. You can find us on all socials at DubLife Diaries or shoot me an email. I'm not hard to find. DubLifeDiaries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep the engines humming and the wheels turning, and always follow the road that inspires you. This is Joe Person. I'm signing off. I'll catch you on the next ride.